Closed captioning for the professors is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury and wrongful death law firm in Chicago.
More than 2 million U.S. college students are enrolled in remedial education courses, according to a recent story by Bloomberg News. But does remedial education have a place at the college level? And are those courses really effective at bringing students up to speed? That's the focus of our discussion today on The Professors. Joining us today to talk about remedial education in college are Connie Mixon, political science professor at Elmhurst College, Pamela Canham-Ray, communications professor at Kennedy King College, Rashid Carter, economics professor at Harold Washington College, and Carolyn Schoenberger, attorney and professor of business and law, also at Harold Washington College. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Right, remedial education. For clarification, is remedial education the same as developmental education?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear.
You know, and that gets into the terms that are used about remedial education. Remedial itself has a pretty negative connotation, and so there's been a shift to try to change the language associated with it and to use the term developmental education.
Are there any other more acceptable terms out there?
Foundational. Foundational education is another term that's affiliated with remedial.
Okay.
And what we're talking about here are students that are not prepared for college level work, that don't place into college level courses and need some sort of brush up, additional training, education before they're ready for those college level courses.
Yes.
All right, so for the purpose of discussion, we'll be using the less sexy term, remedial education, right? Okay, so we talk about remedial education. Is there a place for it in the community college setting? Carolyn, what do you think?
I think it's a perfect setting. Why not? We're open to everyone. We're part of the American dream. And we take people and we give them a chance. Now, not everyone's going to make it, but a lot of people can make it, and we ought to facilitate their efforts.
Okay.
I'm in agreement. I mean, community college, we're all things to all people, and without remedial education, the community college is defined as an open door school. And as an open door school, that means anyone who wants to go to college can go to college. And the remedial is in place to prepare those so that they can take academic courses or whatever path they decide to take. But yes, I think that there's a place for it.
Rashid.
Yeah, I think the consensus is that we need to serve students who need remediation in various areas. But I think the bigger issue we need to address is how do we best serve those people, because it's not just youngsters, it's also adults who are coming back to school. So how do we serve that population of individuals who need that sort of developmental training in different areas? Should we be the one-stop shop for that? I mean, are we best equipped to do that? Should we in fact be investing in more specialized services that can provide those resources? I think the thing we have to do is revisit what our function is in terms of providing remediation.
Connie.
I agree. But what we have seen happen over the years is that more and more four-year institutions have refused and just stopped providing remediation. So there's no other choice but the community college level. And Pamela, as you said, you talked about the open door. Community colleges are the open door to our democracy. And our mission is to serve any of those 18 and older who will benefit from advanced education and training, and remediation is a very critical part of a community college mission.
Now, for the sake of disclosure, Connie will serve as our subject expert. Because, Connie, you wrote your article, was it 2011? Is that based on your dissertation, or?
Yes, my doctoral dissertation is a case study of post-secondary remedial education in the state of Illinois. And I recently had an article about remediation published by the Illinois Political Science Review.
Yeah, fall 2011.
Right, last year.
Page
and
72. To 115.
Thanks for reading it. I appreciate you and my mom, right?
For citation.
And I'm more of the policy funding expert, not necessarily how it plays out in the classroom, but more from a public policy standpoint.
And I do want to talk about the public policy standpoint because, well, let's just flow in the conversation, okay? One of the things I learned in reading your article, you were talking about at some point, remedial education became this dirty word. Can you help us understand what you found in your study?
Well, when you look at the hierarchy of higher education, you've got these sort of rings on the ladders, right? So you've got your top research one, elite universities, and then you've got, your state mid-level, and you've got your four-year institutions. Community colleges have always been sort of the lower rung of that. And the reality is nobody wants to do remediation. No institution wants to admit that they do remedial education. When you think about a college, you shouldn't be remediating. You shouldn't be teaching what really students should have learned in their K-12 education. And this gets into a lot of the public policy issues, is that citizens and our legislators are not eager to fund remediation at the college level or to support it at the college level because they feel that they're charging taxpayers twice for what students should have learned during their elementary and secondary education.
There's a population that's not being considered.
I agree with you. I'm just telling you what the policy is.
I understand that, but I'm part of that population. I last took math in 1966. We didn't have calculators. We had slide rules. And suddenly I find myself taking a course in finance at the graduate level. I had to learn how to use a calculator, and I had to relearn algebra. And I went to a great high school. So it's not just people who didn't learn it. Maybe we've evolved. Maybe people want to go back to school at an advanced age and better.
When you're looking at the impacts of globalization on our society, our workers are going to have to retrain and re-educate, and many of them will be returning adults that are looking for new skills to be able to advance themselves in their profession. And many of those students are going to need remediation in addition to the typical, 18, 19-year-olds that come unprepared.
But let's talk about the K-12 because now you've hit a nerve of mine. And that is that when we talk about K-12 education, I'm going to go back to talk about the U.S. Department of Education, they're always looking to get their indicators from the business or the industry on, so what are the needs? What are the needs in order to have a population that can work? And so now you've got these business leaders that are coming back and saying, yeah, we need people that can do more rivets. We need people more to do that. Okay. Tell curriculum they need to teach people how to do more rivets. But one of the great arguments that I heard was there was an article called The 5 Myths of Remedial Education. It was in 2011 by Wellman and Vandal. And they said that one of the first myths, they said remedial education is a K-12 problem. And they countered it by saying, no, it's not, because theoretically there is not a college-ready standard for the K-12 curriculum. So it's kind of like, so what are we going to be? Are we going to be based on, do we need to have college-ready standards? Because right now we're getting everyone more geared to be vocational.
Yeah. So that's what's.
So it's kind of like setting them up to fail.
That's right, and I think one of the things that is missing, one of the big gaping holes in the totality of our educational paradigm here in this country is that there's not enough conversation between colleges of any kind and high schools, and that conversation needs to happen. There needs to be some synchronicity.
It just seems like such an unnatural statement to make, doesn't it?
It does. It really does, and I think that's a really good place to start. I'm happy to report that the city colleges have tried to make some headway in that regard with the Level Up program. We've had conversations with CPS schools. And we set up a paradigm to help better prepare students to take college-level courses so that we can have them not waste resources, time resources, monetary resources, taking remedial courses when they get to the college level. And that program has worked. And I think more efforts like that need to be developed so that we can help students who are.
Let's talk about the myth about funding. Is it really costly? Look, I'm telling you, I love these 5 myths of remedial education. It says colleges effectively, no, it's bankrupting the system. And they said, no, technically it's inexpensive.
Yeah, it's a small percentage of the overall higher education budget. Remediation's done on the cheap. And that's part of the problem with it. That
they said not regular, they don't use quote unquote regular faculty.
No, most of it's done by adjuncts.
Cheap technology.
Cheap technology, and when you look at what it costs in general, it's a small percentage of the overall higher education budget, but our policy priorities play themselves out in funding. Looking at the state of Illinois, there's 6 categories, by which community colleges are funded: categorical grants, credit hour grants. Remediation is funded at the lowest level. Remediation actually receives like $13 per credit hour from the Illinois Community College Board. Overall, the average is $36 per credit hour. And so what are we telling those students in remediation? You know, a student that was sitting in, when I taught at City Colleges of Chicago, a student sitting in my political science course was receiving, you know, that City Colleges was receiving $36 per credit hour for that student. But just right across the hall, in the developmental reading course, they were only getting $13, $14 for those students.
So we're sending out that discreet message that they don't value.
They don't matter.
They don't matter.
They're not as valued as much as other students.
I mean, you know, my dad always told me, if you ever want to know the worth of a person, watch how they spend their money. So it's kind of like it's a contradictory argument. It's like on one moment we have this great rhetoric. We're here, we want to help you, but then I don't want to invest too much money in that.
And there's efforts all over the place to remove remediation.
Is it because nobody wants to, because it's kind of like passing, you know how when we're kids and we have like, I don't want it, you take it, I don't want it, you take it. Is it, that's what's going on? It's like, it's not my problem.
And it's a blame game.
It's a blame game.
Yeah.
It is a blame game. So let's talk about college ready standards, which, am I safe to assume on my research, I didn't find them yet. So am I correct? They really don't exist.
Well, they've started
on
a
national, on a shared landscape. Now, like I said, there are some K-12 institutions that get it right. They get it. They get the whole, we're training our students to be college ready. But that's not the common across the landscape. It's not the norm.
No, Illinois Senator Ed Maloney has been a big proponent of community colleges. He's retiring this year, an Illinois state senator. He was able to get through the Illinois legislature a pilot project that would work with K-12 and community colleges in establishing some of those standards. But it was a very small pilot project with only a handful of the 48 community colleges in the entire state, and the funding just isn't there to keep that going and to model it and be able to, you know, scale it to the other community colleges in the state.
Can we step back and maybe define what we mean by the standards?
College ready standards?
Yep.
What they're saying is that what does not exist right now is a curriculum that teaches our children how to be college ready. Not just focusing on the content, but actually how to manage their time.
Soft skills.
Right, those soft skills are what does it mean to be a college student? Because, you know, when you're in college, you know, let's be honest, when we were freshmen, we were amazed when we found out, oh, I don't have to go to class if I don't want to.
Right.
You mean I can leave early right now if I don't want to? I can eat this Doritos and this, you know. So it's all part of that, but it's an issue of teaching certain literacies, how to manage your time, as well as what does it mean to have those AP courses so you're ready to have a higher order of thinking or critical thinking when it comes to taking a class and the teacher asks you, yeah, write this paper and tell me your opinion, and the students are unable to express their opinion.
I have, every class that I teach requires writing. And I emphasize commas, and I'm not an English teacher. Grammar, paragraphs, a title. And these are things that I shouldn't have to be saying to my students, you have to include. Someone should have said that to them before they went to college.
But this isn't just a community college problem. I found it, I've taught at a variety of different institutions. I find that same problem at more elite Research One universities, to private liberal arts colleges, to the community colleges. That's
it's a
universal problem.
And
part of it is we've taught, you know, it's the standards movement that started after Sputnik and A Nation at Risk, and the whole market orientation that's been taken towards education in general in the United States.
And, and then let's talk about the evolution from the standards to the metrics to validate the standards so you can get the funding.
There's been this push. Students are taught so much to the test. I have students that are in my Political Science 201 National Government course that can recite parts of the U.S. Constitution better than I can. But when I ask them what it means, how it applies to their real life, they don't know. They don't know that critical thinking part of connecting the dots has been missing in recent years since we've made this shift to more standards-based education.
See, I get nervous when I hear about standards because to me it's starting to get into academic freedom. Now, having said that, I teach business law, and I found by having two students come up and argue a problem on both sides with the class as the jury, there was like a sea change. It's something that had not been suggested by professors I've consulted with. Something like that, suddenly they're arguing on behalf of someone else, and they're really getting into it. But it worries me that if I were required to do something in a certain way, so it's not that I object to standards. I want the ability to experiment.
Yeah, but I don't think standards encroach on academic freedom. I think the standards are saying, look, we need to make sure we're all covering the same thing, A, B, C, and D. I don't care how you cover it. I just need to know that you're covering it. And can you give me some sense of assessment that says, and I know that they're getting it. So I don't think it really encroaches into academic freedom, because what we're doing is we're saying that there's a base standards that if I take an English 101 class here at Kennedy King, if I take it over at wherever the place may be, we're all learning that the comma belongs here and the semicolon belongs here.
They should have been having that since they were in elementary school, that there's a paragraph.
Well, that's true.
They should have, yeah. I mean, but they're not getting that. You asked earlier about some of the reasons why, and I think it has something to do with really what's symbolic of our cultural ethos here in America. And I think this whole notion of survival of the fittest is very real, right? So if the kid doesn't get it, if they don't show a certain amount of aptitude, then oh well, my kid gets it, these kids get it, so that's okay. So there's like this de-emphasis on investing in kids who simply don't get it. And I think that's part of the reason why we don't see funding being regaled to institutions or individuals who need it. If you talk about the totality of needs that young people have to prepare them for college level courses, it goes beyond just being able to do basic math and basic reading. We have to talk about psychological sort of training. Emotional, it's so many other things that come with that, and I think that the totality of that investment is discouraging to a lot of entities because it just takes too much. But that's the way we have to go. To have a kid come to class and want to debate about legal issues, for instance, or whatever the issue might be, they have to know how to speak. They have to know how to look people in the eye. They have to know how to structure an argument. And you're right, that should happen long before they get to your classroom. But there seems not to be a dire need to prepare these kids for that point in time.
Let me ask you this: why
it's a vicious circle?
Coming to class on time.
All of those things.
An assignment being computer generated with paragraphs.
Skills,
These are skills, being able to talk to someone, not just shouting out in class, not just getting up and walking around.
Let me ask you this. Now, here I go. Why do you think it's not an administrative priority?
Well, it gets to the central question of politics. This very central question of politics is who gets what, when, and how. Who is served by remediation? It's primarily low-income minority students that have been underrepresented in higher education forever. And you have to ask the question, where are our policy priorities and what happens to this population? And where is the compelling push to do better? It's absent. And why?
And half the American population, I think one of the interesting things that came out of this last presidential election cycle is, President Obama won, and that was a great victory to some. But half the population vehemently opposes blacks, Latinos, the least of us getting things. Remember, so I mean, so that sort of perspective is out there.
Because I'm be honest with you, I'm still waiting on my gift. Romney
said
I
got. Okay. So, but how is Romney and those individuals, how are they empowered? Because there is half the population, at least in this country, that actually feels that way.
So are we talking about subversive control, elitism, maintaining a status quo, a system? That feeds into it. Or is it important to have a democracy that's full of citizens who are nothing but sheep?
That's the question we have to ask ourselves. I think it's something to be said for training. I know in the article you referenced earlier, there's the issue of how do we prepare students, right? Should all students go to college, right? To borrow that phrase from Rick Santorum, President Obama wants all the kids to go to college. Ha ha ha! He's such an elitist. And so that begs a really good question: how do we want to prepare our kids? Is college the way to go? Should they go into vocational training? What should that look like? In other countries, we know those paradigms are in place.
But then we track them.
Right. Yeah, but that's one of the 5 myths of remedial
right.
education. It was myth number 5. Some students aren't college material. Now, I'm going to be honest with you because the show's getting ready to wrap up, but I have to tell you, that was one of pet peeves. Somebody told me that one time. Yeah. Everybody's just not college material. And I was like, everybody want to eat. Yeah. Everybody want to work.
That's right.
But the counter argument is that basic skills premised on college readiness standards should be for all.
That's right.
So I think a lot of times in our conversations, we need to be the ref on the field and call out a yellow flag the moment someone says, well, college ain't for everyone. I'll be like, that's not true. That's not true. But the college readiness needs to still be there because it's not just about being ready for college. It speaks to a higher learning.
Being ready for life.
Period.
What did we learn from the last economic meltdown? We had a lot of Americans who were just financially illiterate. They just didn't know. They just had a lack of financial awareness.
Yeah.
So no matter what your
didn't
your
even know they
vocation
were illiterate.
And didn't know they were illiterate. But there was a population of elitists who knew they were illiterate. And blacks and Latinos and poor populations of individuals were preyed upon. So I think, if nothing else, that provides a justification for no matter what area you want to go into, there needs to be a baseline educational model that prepares you in math. I'm an economist. I get kids in class or adults in class, and I start writing graphs in math, and they look at me like, you know, I turned into a ghost because they're just afraid. They have this math aversion.
I would have the same reaction.
I'm sure.
The same reaction.
Absolutely.
This is a speech class. Why are we doing math?
Right. On the other hand, when they take a law class or they take a marketing class and they actually find out they have to write papers, you know, they're stunned.
Oh, no, or they're astonished they have to read.
You know.
Or do research. I teach speech, and they're required to have English 101 before they even. It's a prerequisite. And I'm still having issues with subject-verb agreement, issues with...
Or just the ability to do research in general.
Just to do
because
the
you Googled it
research,
doesn't mean that's
works-cited
research.
page.
Well, it's
I can't use Yahoo. What do you mean I can't use Yahoo? No, it's not reputable. It's not a
need
credible source.
Wikipedia.
And so they don't understand. And
I do a wonderful library instruction about Wikipedia, let me tell you.
You know, what worries me is that all of our public policy solutions to this problem, there's this problem of post-secondary remediation, and all of our public policy solutions have been aimed at eliminating the problem. They've all been aimed at improving K-12 schools. And
there are some community colleges that are also dealing with remedial education, and they're getting it, quote unquote, right, or they're trying.
Such limited attention to the effectiveness and actual provision of post-secondary remedial education. And we've seen this shift to more vocational training. And the reality is, in today's economy, in a global world, whatever job you're going to have to be able to read, write, and compute.
Absolutely.
Remediation is not going away, and we might as well do a good job of it.
You're exactly right. Exactly right. I think what we need to do, and again, this is the issue of funding and resource prioritization, but we have to provide a holistic model of an educational platform that's going to address these huge deficits. I mean, if you look at the data, Connie spoke to it earlier, and we talk about African Americans, 5% by the time they graduate from college are ready to excel in the ACT on a basic college-ready level. That's alarming, to say the least.
But let's talk about ACT, because then there's another part of the argument that when it comes to remedial education is saying that it's really nothing wrong with the students, there's something wrong with the test, the placement testing. What say you?
Tests have been challenged frequently.
Of course.
Because who writes the exams? And so the people, the test makers, they usually are white males that are compiling and making these exams. And so the minority students, the Hispanics, the blacks, the underserved, that population have not been exposed. Even with some of the entrance exams that we use now, they're outdated. But it's very expensive to norm new exams.
That's right.
And so as a result of that, they keep using the same exam.
What should be included, if we were forget the money to revise the ACT or the SAT, what should be in there that would hopefully be a better barometer of some of the
I think that would make a great topic, because I think that's a very layered That's a very thick and heavy response that we would really have to address, because not only are we talking about what goes in the ACT test, the dynamics of the GED is also changing, and that's really going on the radar that a lot of people haven't even paid attention to. The GED test is now changing. It is now going to be completely online or by computer, and it's going to be more expensive. So now does that mean that the states, are they still going to be willing to pick up the tab? Right. But let me ask you this. Let's talk about who's getting it right. So here at City Colleges of Chicago, one of the first remarks that was made by our chancellor was, I don't know if it was taken out of context, was to remove remedial education. But in the process of reinvention, they've done Level Up. So tell us about Level Up, because Rashid, you did work with reinvention. Correct,
and the Level Up program is one of the most important successes from my perspective to come out of reinvention. And again, what it does is it takes CPS students, it is a bridge program, so it takes CPS students, and over the course of the summer, before they enter into the city colleges, it gives them training in mathematics, reading, and writing, so that by the time they matriculate into the city colleges, they won't have to take remedial courses. They can move right into college level courses, right? So for the purpose of eventually graduating, right? Because we know a lot of our students, only 10% who take remedial classes end up graduating in 3 years. And so we're looking to hopefully improve that outcome by providing this Level Up bridge program. And the wonderful thing about it, it finished the second cycle this past summer, and it has been a wonderful success. Students have, we've seen gains. So what happens is initially they take a compass test. Right. They have their skill level analyzed, and then when they finish the program, they take another test to see if they've made improvements. And consistently, we've seen over all the 7 campuses with kids coming from all over the CPS that they have in fact improved. And so that's a really wonderful program that needs to be expanded, and it's something that is a success of reinvention. Well, let's talk about some other programs. There's the Gateway to CCC that started at Truman, bridges adult education students into credit tuition courses, tuition waive courses. But let's talk about the tuition waive courses. So isn't there a kind of psyche or something that happens to your esteem when you come in and you test, and it was like, oh, dude, you're not quite ready for college, so it's remedial education. And then I think they get pigeonholed in taking classes that are not credit courses. And so doesn't that kind of play with the whole ambition and the aspiration? Because it's like, yeah, I'm in college, but I'm not really in college.
I'd like to address that. I'd like to address that.
Oh, and we got to wrap it up, so go ahead.
The testing piece. Because, they're doing wonderful things now with the freshmen and the Level Up, but the people who are not that new student, those returning students that are test, there's not enough emphasis placed on take this test serious. This test is a test that will determine your academic future.
Because you can't retake it.
For a year. You cannot take it for a year.
Okay.
And so that is one of the concerns.
God, you got to sit out for a whole year if you had a bad test.
Well, you can't sit out for a whole year. However, at that point, you are placed, and your academic career, your future is determined on that exam.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why it needs to start there. And you're right, there's a stigma attached to remedial education. How do we make it positive? It's in place to help the students so that they can do well in the academics.
Well, there are some, we got to wrap it up, but I know there are some who often say that they eliminate remedial education altogether. They just put you right in the classroom with everyone else, and they provide just-in-time tutoring to help the students matriculate, because that helps with the esteem.
Those are the margins like that in some of my business classes. And the success is uneven.
Thank you. That's our show for today, but the conversation continues online. Join us at WYCC.org and see you next time on The Professors.